Well, for Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated, I'm Brendan Gulick along with Brett Hiltbrand, wrapping up what was not the day the Buckeyes had in mind. 73-68, the final score this afternoon, as Ohio State falls for the fourth consecutive game. This time it's to end the regular season, closing things out with a loss to Illinois. So now it's Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa, and Illinois, and this meat grinder, Brett, at the end of the regular season that we knew was going to be so tough ends up not yielding but one victory for the Buckeyes. And now they limp into the Big Ten tournament, licking their wounds a little bit, knowing they're still playing decent basketball, but now they've got to muster up some courage here and try to get going on Thursday.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think of all the games that we've seen in this losing streak, this was the one that I think felt maybe the most winnable. Perhaps that this game was absolutely there for Ohio State, especially in those final closing moments. You could, I have my own issues with win probability, and it sometimes it's maybe not the best math. But I mean, if you look at the win probability with about 3 minutes to go, Ohio State I think was probably in the 70s, somewhere in there, and then it's just a straight like 180 curve back up to Illinois. They went absolutely ice cold, missed 10 of their last 10 shots in that 3 minute stretch, and then played some really tough defense, some bad defense, quite frankly, and to go along with that. And Illinois kind of come in there and it's a smash and grab in the last 4 minutes, and they leave Columbus with a huge win for them because it locks up a 1 seed, and they're probably, barring something outrageous, that fourth 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I sure think so too. I'd be stunned if Illinois and Michigan are not both 1 seeds along with Gonzaga and Baylor. I'm not sure there's going to be a whole lot of drama there. And look, even more immediately now for Ohio State, we can certainly talk more about the Big Ten tournament itself as the week goes along. Maybe this can be more of a space discussing today's game. But the Buckeyes lock up not having a double bye. So now they've got to play on Thursday, which means in order to win the Big Ten tournament, which they're capable of doing, we certainly saw that level of basketball. Now it gets a little bit harder. You've got to win 4 games in 4 days. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday this upcoming week. And in this conference, I mean, that feels like a really, really stiff challenge. So we'll talk about the Big Ten tournament maybe a little bit more here as we preview that this week. But as far as today's game goes, Kofi Cockburn in the first half was unbelievable for sure. You kind of knew that coming in, right? But I think what bothered me more was that it felt like anybody who wanted to get to the rim for Illinois could. They had look after look after look within 3, 4, 5 feet of the basket. And I think Illinois had like 17 of 23 from 2-point range, which almost all of them were in the paint. I mean, that's inexcusable, right? You can't play defense like that. Credit the Buckeyes for fixing that a bit in the second half, but it still wasn't enough by the end of the night.
On the ball defense was bad in the first half, straight up. And then they had a really aggressive hedge with any ball screen with Cockburn in it, that led a lot to then a weak side swing, and then it's just beating someone off the dribble to get to the rim. That hedge was a big reason, I think, for a part of some of those problems, because it's a dribble drive off of a really deep closeout, which is something that I think most teams in college basketball would take advantage of, especially elite ones like Illinois. And Ohio State stopped that in the second half, with the exception of the last 4 minutes of the game. They started out that real aggressive hedge again, and then what happened? Illinois got clean looks. And I think when they go back and they look at the film, they'll realize that that specific type of how they were defending really let them down. Illinois got to the rim at will for probably 2/3 of the game, and it looked easy at times. That's a recipe for disaster for this Ohio State team that needs to make things a little bit more difficult on that end of the floor, especially if you're shooting 40% on offense yourself. you have to, if the two things are working in tandem there, you can't have both shifts go down, so to speak, or you're going to come out and lose. And that's exactly what happened today. And all that being said, the game was still winnable, which I think in some ways speaks to what maybe we kind of heard Chris Holtmann talk about in the postgame, right? Where there were things that he felt were positive despite some pretty glaring issues in this game. And it'll be, kind of up to him and his staff in emphasizing those, come Big Ten tournament.
Maybe a positive side. I thought this was maybe one of the best games that Justice Suing has played in a little while. He was on the floor for, I think, 34 minutes. He played an awful lot of the game. And for the most part, his aggression, I thought, was in appropriate places. We've heard in games past Chris Holtmann barking from the bench at Justice about something in particular. Maybe I didn't hear it as much today because I wasn't looking for it, but I felt like, they were not the loud, audible Justice screams, coming from across the way. I thought he played pretty well this afternoon. And look, you're not going to get too many nights where he's going to give you something like a 20-point effort, but I thought he played well enough tonight. Maybe that's a positive thing that the team can take into the tournament because they need him.
Yeah, and they need him, and I think another thing that they, is kind of it's a negative that I think lends itself to a more positive, kind of game plan going forward. It's very obvious that this team can struggle for offense when CJ Walker is on the bench with foul trouble. And I think he played 28 minutes tonight. Yeah, 28 minutes. And really, Ohio State only went 6 deep in the bench. Arns played 22. And then anyone else who played, Zedke, Seth Towns, and Musa Jallow are under 10. And so you have to protect CJ Walker a little bit there. And I think that bad on-the-ball defending, getting on guys' hips, led to a lot of kind of cheap fouls from him in those dribble drives that, Ohio State maybe kind of defensively kind of sinking in a little bit on their shell to try and prevent a little bit of that going forward.
So I'm at the arena. Brett's obviously at his house. Caroline is producing from home as well. Caroline, if we have the box score, go ahead and throw that up too. We can chat a little bit about some of the numbers from the game this afternoon. And look, it certainly wasn't perfect, but that second half, I think Ohio State did a pretty good job of managing the slugfest. I think there were 18 fouls in the first 15 minutes of that second half, I just felt like they weathered the storm, right? They stayed in the game. Obviously, a nice start to the second half, quickly climbed them back in. But Justice ended up fouling out at the end of the game. CJ picked up 4 fouls. To me, the 4 fouls on Kofi Coburn was interesting because he didn't have any in the first half. And it just felt like the way Ohio State was playing. Chris Holtmann told me post-game that, it wasn't a emphasis in the locker room of, hey, we got to try to get this guy. It was more just the way they were playing. But when Coburn went to the bench, I think they struggled a little bit.
100%. And it's not a good thing that I would guess that that's the first half Coburn's ever played at Illinois, in his career where he didn't have a foul. The fact that they didn't really go at him in the first half is kind of crazy, especially when you think about how that game was officiated, which, that ebb and flow was maybe a little inconsistent at times. But I think in some ways you could look at this as maybe the most stark of the 4 defeats for Ohio State. I think this is the most stark one where it's you could go in a very negative direction in looking at this game, or you could kind of pick out a little bit of the glass half full moments. And I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards the half full, despite this game, feeling winnable for Ohio State, and they found a way to lose it. For number one for me, and I think you would agree with this, you saw it in person. It felt like the juice was back with this team. It felt like that rest that they got, that week bye basically, was massive for them. Especially Coming out in the first 5 minutes in the second half. We saw that in the last game against Iowa. They came out absolutely on fire in those first couple of minutes of the second half, and then they nosedived. They didn't have any juice beyond that. That was not the case today. You saw some longevity with the strength in the legs from Ohio State, and I think that bodes well come tournament time. Now, if they have to play 4 games in 4 days, that might be a bit of an issue. In fact, I guarantee it'll be a bit of an issue. But obviously, they did what they needed to do to get some of these guys in a really good spot recovery-wise, and I think that's absolutely huge for the Buckeyes going forward.
I know we touched on Dwayne Washington there a little bit. His end of game last few minutes, maybe not the efficiency that you want to see from him. And I know the final shooting numbers there aren't great, but take that out of it. The other 35 minutes, what did you think of the way Dwayne played tonight?
I think it took 3 months, but finally an Ohio State opponent figured out that he struggles to create when you force him to go left. Yep. And I'm not surprised that it was Brad Underwood to realize that if you literally deny him half the court, that it's going to be an issue. And Ohio State actually played okay through that because it led to some nice pick and pop motion with E.J. Liddell on the other side, especially with Coburn on the bench, because there was always a little bit of separation there that led to Liddell throwing a couple in, or at the very least getting in a good spot in an ISO there and then going to work and scoring in the paint. But when it came time, to make something happen, and Illinois was not going to either switch that or make a really violent hedge, it was requiring Dwayne to create a shot off of his left. He just couldn't do it. Case in point. And I can probably think of off the top of my head, probably 6 or 7 different instances of that in moments, in flashes, that we've seen so far or earlier, in the past throughout the season. And none of the opponents that Ohio State have played has really picked up on that and denied him. It was really incredible. There were a couple times his defender literally, parallel to the sidelines, with his shoulders and hips. It's like, you are not getting to your right, man, but I'll give you your left all day.
All day long.
It was, and I would say from about 7 minutes on, it was really obvious that was the case. And it's not an accident that in the first part of that stretch, E.J. Liddell got 3 basically wide open looks that he buried without any problem. And then all of a sudden it was a quick switch and a hedge, and then he had a hand in his face, and that was denied. And then it's up to Dwayne to beat someone and either get to the hoop or find someone on the opposite for an open shot. And that really didn't end up happening, obviously. And I think, I can guarantee you, absolutely positively, that you are going to see that from opponents from Ohio State from now on, that you will see at times guys literally perpendicular to the basket with their shoulders and hips, forcing Dwayne Washington to go late, forcing him to go left, especially late in the shot clock.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it either. Caroline, go ahead and lose the box score there. I want to talk about E.J. Liddell here too. Look, E.J., I thought in the first half just struggled to get in rhythm. To your point, I think he benefited from the way Dwayne was being defended, and it helped E.J. get rolling a bit in the second half. He kind of had a quietly pretty effective night. But the overarching thought for me when I watched E.J. Liddell or Zed Key or Kyle Young tonight was that they played with great energy. But, Kofi Coburn he's a legit pro, All-American. I don't know. He might be better than Luka Garza. I realize Luka's numbers are off the charts good, but I think Coburn's a little bit more athletic. He certainly plays with a little bit more pace. He's better on the defensive end than Garza is. Look, we're trying to split hairs here between 2 of the best players in the country, but when Kofi,
he might not be better now. He might not be better now, but I think his ceiling is way bigger.
He's got a chance to be a lottery pick. He's legit, really, really good. And yet again, this Ohio State team that plays with incredible toughness and has played against some of these Kofi Cockburn type players throughout the course of the year. They held him in check a bit, but I think he just kind of wore him down a little bit by the end of the game.
I thought this was one of the more physical games that we've seen.
This was a total prototypical Big Ten game for sure.
Yeah, and I bet you, because now this is, I think, the third Big Ten game I've watched in the last 3 days that's felt pretty physical like that. Rutgers, Minnesota was really physical in the paint, and if you want a mini prediction time, mark my words, that might be a bit of an issue officiating wise in the Big Ten tournament, because the physicality there game to game might not be officiated all that consistently. So you might see some consternation from some of the coaches across the Big Ten come tournament time. But I do think the physicality it kind of helped EJ a little bit. I think once he realized that it was going to be that type of game, I actually think he blossomed. He really, really leaned into it. And I felt like the more physical it got, the more it benefited him. And I thought he absolutely battled in this game. There were a couple shots that he had, a couple and ones in this game that was just all, grown bleep man game, if you will. And that is huge for Ohio State, because those are the type of grinding out possessions that you need to kind of make happen, in the tournament time. But I thought he played really, really well for the most part. And I also think that type of game, I think, is, despite it, coming in a losing effort, I actually think that helps his confidence. And maybe, hopefully, you'll see that kind of bleed over to the rest of the team on the offensive end. That Ohio State played a future 1 seed tonight. Okay, played bad, probably like B- C+ type game, and still almost won. I think that if you're Chris Holtmann, you're preaching that over the next handful of days, and I think you're really drilling that into EJ Liddell and Dwayne Washington. It's yeah, you guys, you guys can let some of the confidence from those positive moments really boost you going forward.
I just think, look, this team is this close to winning at least 2 of the 4 games that they've lost here consecutively. They were that close against Michigan in a terrific game. Kind of crumbled down the stretch against Michigan State, even though the score was still fairly tight. Obviously, the Iowa game was a clunker. And, Ohio State basically played more than half of this game trailing. Came back and took a 68-64 lead, and things looked like they were turning the corner in that final 4-minute war. It's a bad time to go ice cold from the floor. You're not going to see too many games where this Buckeye team is going to go 0 for 10 to close out a game. Obviously it's possible. It happened today, but it certainly doesn't happen with any great regularity. And look, of those 10 shots, I think half of them were good looks. The other half,
the Kyle Young 3 goes down more often than not. Probably.
Yep, I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't have a problem with Dwayne's 3 ball.
And that Kyle Young 3 makes it a 6-point game. The game's probably over if that shot goes in.
Yeah, huge difference in the way that momentum would have swung there. So again, I wasn't too frustrated by the selection as much as I was. There were a couple of times where I thought Dwayne did force it a bit in that last couple minutes, especially the one where he drove down the left side of the key to the basket. That was an awfully tough play. And look, give credit to Ayo Dosunmu. We've really talked about him. He comes back after missing the last 3 games. He wore a mask and it looked like it never bothered him throughout the course of the game. And much like in the first matchup, Ayo was pretty clutch in the second half. I know Illinois didn't win the first game, but he still had a great second half that first game. And tonight, he hit 4 free throws in a row at the end of the game when he needed to help his team ice it. And for a guy who also is a potential lottery pick in the upcoming NBA draft, whether or not he goes pro, I don't think is much of a question anymore. I expect that he will. I think he's probably the best transition guard in the country. He plays with impressive poise at that speed. I love his game, and give the kid credit for the way he hit foul shots when he needed to tonight. But that was another backbreak for Buckeyes, right? You've got a big guy in Coburn, you've got a great guard in Dosunmu, and Andre Kubil tonight. He I don't want to say he came out of nowhere because he's been doing that kind of stuff throughout the course of the season, but he was sort of the third of that trio, and he really hit Ohio State.
Yeah, and that and one towards the end, I want to say maybe like 5 minutes, 4 minutes left, 3 minutes left that Dosunmu had was like that to me that's where I felt like the momentum clearly shifted. It was the block that I think fouled Justice Suing out of the game. So maybe it was like 2 minutes left. But that was a good example of beating, we were talking about earlier about, beating someone off the dribble in a situation that was probably too easy, and then late help side coming in. Illinois might be more dangerous as like that late slide in 1 seed than any fourth 1 seed team that we've seen in a good long while. I think
they are very capable of winning a national championship. Absolutely.
100%. And I think too, I kept thinking about, as the game was progressing, like it kind of like historically, it felt to me a little bit like Illinois owed Ohio State 1 for the final game of the regular season, Illini versus Buckeyes, the Matt Sylvester shot, back in, I think it was 2005. And then I think there was one back in the 70s that, kept the Illinois from winning a national championship or something along those lines. But it felt a little bit like, it was kind of like their game a little bit, really, especially in those last 3 minutes. It was very obvious to me that they just felt like they were on the front foot. And I think that's Brad Underwood in a nutshell, right? That there is something about the teams that he has, at a couple different spots now, a couple different jobs that always seem to have that extra gear peaking at the right time. And that's a big reason why he's been able to move a couple different places, is because the teams play well when everybody's watching, and they are 100% dangerous. And I think if you're in Illini fan, you love that this team is playing well, and you feel super confident going into the conference tournament and the NCAA tournament. Let me ask you this, because I think this is an interesting question. We've talked about Ohio State's efficiency on offense now, especially the last month and change, with in awe. Are you surprised to see them maybe regress a little bit to the mean, so to speak, in that they're maybe coming back down to the average, and the efficiency numbers are dropping?
Yeah, I guess the only reason I would say I'm not terribly surprised by that is just because of the quality of team in the Big Ten. I would be more surprised if they were playing Nebraska, or Northwestern with any regularity. But considering the quality of team we played over this last month, for sure, somewhere along the way, there's a combination of shots aren't falling and teams are learning more about you. They're learning how to defend you better. And by the way, they're really, really talented. So yeah. I'm not that alarmed by it, but it's certainly worth discussing for a good chunk of the second half of this year. I mean, basically most of January and the first half of February, Buckeyes were like the number 4 offensive efficiency team in the country. And they were doing it from all over the place, inside, outside, mid-range jump shots. I really like the way this team was playing there for a good 6 weeks. When you play defenses as good as Michigan's defense and as good as Illinois' defense, I realize Iowa's not a great defensive team. It was just a flat-out bad game. Tom Izzo's got, he's got it. That team has it. they have always been well coached this time of year. So I'm not terribly surprised by it or overly upset, although it's clearly an issue for sure. Talking about Ohio State's defense, we showed Abdul's comment. If you want to drop a comment along the way, we'd love to interact with you. Abdul is not happy about the way Ohio State played defense themselves down the stretch of that game and how frustrating that was to watch. I agree to a point. I think it was frustrating the way the Buckeyes played defense, but if I'm trying to be objective about it, I think you've got to give some credit to the way Illinois basically said, hey, look, this game is not slipping away from us, and they stayed aggressive late. So I think they deserve some credit for the way they played offensively there.
Yeah, and I also think, their commitment to getting to the rim is, in my opinion, is always like a kind of a win-win situation, because if you're getting to the rim, chances are you have teammates crashing. So if you miss the shot and you don't get fouled, you have a good opportunity for an offensive rebound. If you make the shot, it's a high percentage shot, just given the fact that you're close to the basket, obviously, and there's a pretty good chance that you get fouled, right? And
Sure.
Their commitment to that is a massive positive to them, very specifically in this game as well. It also helps when you have a generational big in there who, in addition to, being a guy that can receive the ball and obviously score close to the hoop at a really efficient rate, but he also prevents a lot of big help side guys coming from the opposite, bigs coming from the opposite to block shots. So, I think you're absolutely right that, like, credit due, give credit to where it's due, and Illinois 100%, really stuck to, I think, what is certainly one of their biggest strengths, and that's scoring off the dribble, for sure. We talked about this too when we previewed the game, when we talked about what's something that you wanted to see in from Ohio State, and I said I wanted to see an increase of defensive ball pressure and deflections, from the Buckeyes. I think we saw that literally, and for probably 35 minutes or so. Sure. Yep. in the game, and then it basically didn't happen. And I think those last 5 minutes are really tough. And so I think if you're an Ohio State fan and you watch this game, you felt probably okay about it at times, especially from a deflection standpoint, for probably 3/4 of the game. And then those last 5 minutes, it was just non-existent. So I think there's reason to be frustrated as well.
So that's it. The final act of the regular season is over. And after Ohio State had looked a little shaky early in the season in the non-conference, but had still managed to win some games, a lot of question marks of wondering maybe how this season would go. Not a terrific start to conference play, opening the league 2-3, losing to Minnesota in a really bad loss in January. I would say Ohio State's only had two, truly bad losses this year. One to Iowa last weekend, and the Minnesota game was not great in the first game of the new year. And so there were some question marks as to how the season would go, and then all of a sudden, the Buckeyes turned it around. They won 7 in a row, 10 out of 11, and went from being unranked to literally being a top 5 team in the country. They were number 4 for a couple weeks, and certainly showed that they are capable of making a big run. They won 4 straight games on the road against top 15 opponents. It's never been done in the history of Buckeye basketball, more than 100 years worth of it. There's still a lot of reason to believe in this team, but boy, losing 4 in a row is not the way you want to go into the Big Ten tournament. The Big Ten still has 3 regular season games tomorrow. I think parts of the bracket are locked in, and I'm pretty confident Ohio State is locked in as the 5 seed. We know they will play on Thursday, but for the sake of not wanting to give you any misinformation with 3 games still to play tomorrow, we'll just discuss what's coming up in the Big Ten tournament this week. But we know for sure the Buckeyes will play Thursday. If they win, they'll get to the quarterfinal round. So that means they've got to play 4 games in 4 days if they want to win the Big Ten title. Brett, you saw it. I believe Purdue is the 4 seed, which is a scary thought for Ohio State, considering they've lost to Purdue twice. Both competitive games, certainly a tough one here on this floor back about a month and a half ago at this point. But that's the immediate future for the Buckeyes. Selection Sunday is coming up a week from tomorrow, and Ohio State will find out, where they'll play within the friendly confines of the state of Indiana. Will it be in Indianapolis? Will it be in, maybe on Purdue's campus or IU's campus? They play at Butler. Will it be at Lucas Oil? Lots of different options. We'll find that out here, but it's time. This is everybody's favorite time of year if you love college basketball. And I know there's a lot of Buckeye fans holding their breath right now because this is not the way you want to go into that time of year, but they are still very capable of making a run in the tournament.
I'll leave you with this.
Okay.
Given that Ohio State is now has 0% chance of being a 1 seed, if you like Big Ten basketball, there's never been a situation quite like this before. There is a totally reasonable chance of Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, and Ohio State all making the Final Four this year. That would be crazy and awesome, and I think it would be fun, and we should make it happen. Let's do it.
I would love to see it. I'll be very interested to see how they put the bracket together. I think the committee, and we can talk about this at length later, but I think the committee has the chance to be creative because they don't have to worry about who's flying where. Everybody's in the same place. Put together some crazy matchups and let's have some fun with it and see what happens. I think it'd be a ton of fun, and I really hope they consider that when they put that together a week from tomorrow. 73-68, the final score here at Value City Arena. Last time you're going to see Schottenstein Center here all year long. Obviously, a quiet and, frankly, still a cardboard-friendly place. Those were most of the time the only fans. There were a couple hundred people here today. It was basically just family and friends on senior day. The Buckeyes did have their traditional opportunity post-game for C.J. Walker and Kyle Young to address the small crowd, but certainly an important group because the folks that were here are family and friends of the players and coaches. So it was certainly a nice moment, and we'll share the video of their address coming up here in just a little bit on BuckeyesNow.com. Hope you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for following us throughout the course of the season, and now it's time to see how things are going to go in the postseason. We'll be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournament coming up on Thursday, and we'll chat with you certainly before then on YouTube, on our social media platforms, and over on BuckeyesNow.com. Thanks so much. Final score tonight, 73-68, a win for Illinois.